Greetings, beloved brethren. This is Pastor Keith Merriman. I was sad we were not able to meet together in Grand Rapids this summer, but we know the scripture says, "The mind of man plans his ways, but the Lord directs his steps." In spite of all the challenges the coronavirus has brought, the Lord's work in Africa continues to thrive. I want to share a brief overview of the work in East Africa today. The area we want to cover is in the section of the map where the arrow is pointing. We will start with the country of Uganda. Pastor Roger Yoda moved from Cameroon to Kampala, Uganda on October 1st, 2015, to work with one church that had already been established in that city. Kampala is a city of over 5 million people located just north of Lake Victoria. Because of unfaithfulness on the part of the original group of people, Pastor Roger had to start all over in 2017. He began with just a handful of people, and Christopher Ogala was one of them. Pastor Roger began his Practorium training, and after 4 years of training, he is about to graduate. He has been helping to lead the Kampala GBC, but is hoping to begin a new church plant in Kampala later this year. In fact, I just spoke to him today, and he's excited about the opportunity. Simon Nambale has also been in training in the Practorium, and he also helps lead the church. Theophilus Bagabe is an interesting story. Last year, when our team was in Kampala, I was preaching on Sunday morning on the Transfiguration of Christ. The church tent is right alongside the sidewalk, and they put the speakers toward the street so that people can hear the preaching as they walk by. As I was speaking, I noticed a tall African walk in the back of the tent and stand and listen, and eventually he sat down. After the service, he came and talked with Pastor Roger and myself, and he was a refugee from the Congo who had just moved in down the street and heard the preaching. He said he had had a Pentecostal background and had never heard preaching about the person of Jesus Christ, so he stopped and stayed. To make a long story short, he and his wife were baptized and became members of the church, and he had come to Practorium classes this past year and now is helping to lead the church in Kampala. 12 new believers joined that church just this past year. We now move from the capital city of Kampala to eastern Uganda, where we have another church planter. I met Pastor Simon Peter Otudo on my trip in 2014 to Uganda, where he was baptized by Trine Immersion and became a church planter for the CGBCI. He is in a wheelchair and also has arthritis in both hands. His wife is Margaret, and they have 7 children. In spite of his handicap, he has planted 7 churches in the past 9 years. In 2011, he planted his first church under a mango tree in the village of Kwarkwar. The pastor of the church is Simon Peter Oluka, one of the many Practorium men that Simon Peter has trained. The church has grown to nearly 100 people. In 2014, he planted the next church in the village of Ochapa. Pastor Francis Ijala pastors that group. He was also trained by Pastor Simon Peter. They also have a large group of people in their church. In 2018, Pastor Simon Peter planted another church in Sorati. Sorati is pastored by Pius Imusu, another man trained in the Practorium by Pastor Simon Peter. Also in 2018, Simon Peter planted the church in Kangoli. This church is pastored by Silver Ocean, another one of the Practorium men. In August of 2019, Pastor Simon Peter planted the church in Kanyumu. Another one of his Practorium men, Jesse Omoding, pastors that church. In December of 2019, Pastor Simon Peter planted the church in Orungo. This church is pastored by Adeng Moses. Because of the current lockdown from the coronavirus in Uganda, he began another work this year, 2020. In his home village, south of Orungo, they have built a small structure, and recently he baptized 14 believers by trine immersion. We now move to another country in East Africa, the country of Kenya. The church planter in that country is Pastor Gilbert Amaswache. His wife's name is Alice, and they have 8 children. I had a video chat with him the other day, and all 8 children are home because of the coronavirus, and he said they are eating him out of house and home. Gilbert has planted 7 churches in Kenya. The Kipsina church, where he lives, was the first one. He actually built the church building himself on his own property. I met Pastor Gilbert in 2013 when I was teaching Practorium in Kampala. He traveled from Kenya and spent 3 weeks taking classes. He was originally with the Dunkard Brethren, but he wanted more training, and so he eventually joined the CGBCI as a church planter. This is the Kipsina church family, and they now have over 100 people. The next church he planted was in Kitale, a city of over 100,000. And he trained the man who is pastoring there now, Pastor Leonard Kabate. He also has a good group of saints already at that church. Pastor Gilbert made a trip to the far north and planted a church in Lakichagio, way up in the Rift Valley just south of Sudan. He trained another man to pastor that church, James Tukana. It's a small group, strange looking, but faithful. The next church plants were in Nairobi, the capital city of Kenya, a city of many millions of people. He planted 3 churches there. First, the Keoli GBC, and by the way, all 3 of these churches are in the slums. We had an opportunity to visit them last year when we were on our trip. How sad to see how poor all these people live. Keoli is pastored by Pastor Elisha Admin. All of these men that you will see have been trained by Pastor Gilbert in his Practorium. Pastor Walter Malia is also in that area in Nairobi. And then in the Mathari area, the Mathari Grace Brethren Church is pastored by Pastor Meshach Okoth. Another church that he planted was in Kapenguria. That church is being pastored by Pastor Kennedy. It was just in 2019 that this church began. Pastor Kennedy continues to take Practorium classes with Gilbert. They have a new church plant this year that's planned in the city of Kisumu. Pastor Vincent Aluach, who originally was pastoring in Nairobi, has now moved back to that village and is hoping to plant a new Grace Brethren church there this year. We also have churches in other countries in East Africa. We have a church in Malawi, in the city of Blantyre. The pastor there is Pastor B. Lord Kula. He is also a student of Pastor Roger. There are 2 more church plants in Malawi in 2020, already going on, but just small groups. We also have a church in Rwanda, in the area of Gikumbi. Pastor Prote Shigoza is the pastor there. The Gikumbi Church is a church of over 200. He recently contacted me and said the government is requiring hand washing station, hand sanitizers, and plastic chairs that can be set 1.5 meters apart in order for the church to open. They currently all have wooden benches, which they normally use, but the government will not allow them to use that anymore, and it will cost over $1,000 just for them to open their church this year. There's a new church plant planned this year in the capital city of Kigali. Pastor Roger said there's already a small group meeting there who desire to have a Grace Brethren church in the capital city of Rwanda. Another country that we have in East Africa, a church, is in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Grace Brethren Church is in Bukavu. It's actually in a suburb called Baraka, and so it's called the Baraka Bukavu Grace Brethren Church. There's a young pastor there, Pastor Maurice Biondo. He's a very faithful man. Recently, I received a call from Pastor Roger, who told me that the monsoons had destroyed his mud and stick house completely, and he said $300 would rebuild the whole house. And so we were able to take $300 from the emergency relief funds and rebuild his house for him. He's very thankful and excited. He has plans to plant 2 more churches in Congo yet this year. He already has small groups meeting. We also have a church in Burundi, in Bujumbura. That church is pastored by Pastor Thomas Tiyumwi. And finally, we have a church in Tanzania, in the city of Mwanza. Pastor Roger and Pastor Gilbert left from the north side of Lake Victoria and took a ship across and landed in Mwanza and planted this church in Tanzania. It is pastored by Pastor Sabato, who also is taking Practorium classes. Since 2015, we have now 8 churches in Uganda, 7 churches in Kenya, 1 church in Malawi, 1 church in Burundi, 1 church in Rwanda, and 1 church in Tanzania, with 6 other churches in process to be planted this year. Our financial needs, the monthly need is of almost $8,000 a month. We've been averaging over $4,600 a month, and so our monthly deficit has been over $3,000. I want to thank all who have given and prayed for the ministry in Africa. Remember what John wrote in his last letter. Beloved, you are acting faithfully in whatever you accomplish for the brethren, and especially when they are strangers, and they have testified to your love before the church. You will do well to send them on their way in a manner worthy of God, for they went out for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. Therefore, we ought to support such men, so that we may be fellow workers with the truth.